And when we set it up, some of the initial questioning was, why is this so specific? Like, why are you doing this just for Black students? Why are you doing it just on Oxbridge? This is so specific. And the answer was hard problems need specific solutions. And there were lots of access programs generally already out there, which were looking at, maybe ethnic minority students in general, Russell Group universities in general. But sometimes with these general approaches, you're missing particular groups. And so those general programs had lots of ethnic minority students on them, yes. If you disaggregated the numbers, they had very few Black students on them.
Thank you for coming to the podcast, Naomi. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for making a trek across London in this rainy weather. Seems like the sun has finally left us now, so I appreciate you coming down, and I'm excited to have you on the podcast. To kick things off, I usually like to start off with background and upbringing, and particularly from yourself, with a lot of your background being focused in the education sector. It'd be interesting to understand what the dynamic was like for you growing up, what that environment was like for you, and how important education was in your own upbringing at home.
Good starting question. So I grew up in Croydon. I'm the eldest of 6 girls, and we grew up with my parents both at home. And education was an important part of growing up, actually. Both of my parents were always quite clear with us that they didn't get the opportunities that maybe they could have had if they were from a different background. They were growing up in sort of the 70s and the 80s when, to be frank, there was just a lot of racism in schools. The opportunities weren't always offered. My dad talks about being told he should do woodwork and not ICT. So they both, in their own way, got as much education as they could, but they didn't necessarily feel like they got to reach their potential due to the things within those systems. And so for us, they would always say, if you've got your education, firstly, no one can take that away from you. And secondly, it gives you options. And so that means if you make your way into a particular job and you don't like it, you want to do something else, you've got that option to change and to make a choice. They didn't really say that I needed to do anything in particular. They said that I needed to work towards my potential and make the most of those opportunities. And that's something that really stuck with me. I remember that from quite early on. And they made a big point of being present within our education as well. So as much as they set high standards, which they did, they were there with us to support in the way that they could. And so I've got early memories of, in the summer, my mum making sure that we were doing a certain form of work before we could go and play, for example, or my dad drawing out times tables, squares for us and saying, learn your 7 times table today, and when I get back from work, I'll test you on it. And we wouldn't learn it all day until we had the key, and then we'd run and go and learn it, and then he'd come and test us on it. But I've got that memory of them having that front and center, and they hadn't been able to go to university, but they were very keen that we would have those opportunities, and they would support us in whatever way they could. So that's one of my key memories, education-wise, in regard to how I grew up.
Very interesting. And what was the ambition for yourself when you were growing up?
It's a good question because I don't really know, in the sense that I didn't have a really wide view as to what was out there. I didn't really know what all the possible options were in terms of your educational options or your career options. I knew from what my parents had told me that I needed to do my best, and that meant not necessarily capping what I aimed for by the things that those around me aimed for. Because thankfully, I think things have changed a bit. But when I was growing up and when I was at school, it wasn't necessarily all that cool to really focus on your schoolwork, to constantly get top grades, to always put your hand up in class. And if I'm honest, it probably would have been much easier for me socially if I shied away from that. And if I sat comfortably in some B's and C's, I probably would have had a bit of an easier time. It takes a certain amount of personal strength, I guess, in some environments, to be the person to constantly answer the question and to be speaking back with the teacher about the topic when everyone else is asleep in the classroom. But my parents were always saying to me, you can't set your expectations by the things that those around you are doing, because then you'll only do what they're doing, and you need to push your potential. And they'd always say, we don't mind if you come back with an A, a B, or a C, as long as we know you've done your best. But if you can't tell us you've done your best, then that's going to be a problem. And so that meant that, even if those around me weren't necessarily aiming particularly high, at least academically within school, if I knew this was the work to do, I would aim to do it. I'd aim to maybe go past that. But I didn't, until sort of the end of secondary school, have a sense of what was an option. I knew university was an option. I hadn't really thought about the difference between Russell Group universities, Oxbridge universities. It wasn't really something that I knew a lot about because I hadn't grown up in a household where people had been to university. But in year 11, I had a career session with a teacher who just happened to mention Oxford to me. She said, "Oh, you seem interested in a lot of things. I think you should go for PPE at Oxford." And I sort of thought, okay, I don't know what that is. And also I'd heard of Oxford, but I didn't really associate me or someone like me with Oxford. When it came to moving to do my A-levels, I knew I wanted to do A-levels. I knew I probably didn't want to stay at my school because I had a sense at least that my school didn't produce the best grades at sixth form. It didn't produce sort of people going off to universities of the sorts that I'd heard of but didn't quite know a lot about. And I had a friend who was a little bit more up to speed with things, and she said to me, "Oh, I'm applying to this sixth form." And it was in the neighbouring borough. So I grew up in Croydon. The borough next door to us, Sutton, is a selective borough. It has grammar schools. And I hadn't heard of grammar schools before. I didn't know that this was even a separate system. But she said, "Oh, this school gets super good grades. I'm applying. You should apply too." 3 days before the deadline, I got that form, filled it out and sent it off. And I always say that, my life trajectory might have been quite different if that friend hadn't given me that form and if I hadn't submitted it just on time, because it was going to that school that opened up this world of, oh, yes, lots of people here go to Oxbridge and this is what you do if you want to go to a Russell Group, and here's quite a high level of teaching and also a group of students who were super keen on learning. And I always say that luck shouldn't determine if you get to access that sort of thing, but unfortunately in our society at the moment it does, and I got lucky. Someone gave me that form, I went off to that school, and at that point, that's when I started to realise, oh, okay, like lots of people not that far from me are aiming for top universities, and now I've got some advice to help me to access that. And so at that point, I knew, okay, I can aim for a top university. But at that point, I still didn't really have a clue about careers options.
Yeah, and talking about your parents and them saying that do as well as you can, and whether you get A, B, C, wherever you come home and they're proud of whatever you've achieved. That sounds, what the first thing that comes into my head is that sounds like some great parenting, some lovely parenting, because a lot of parents, and through no fault of their own, but I think it can be fairly detrimental, would put a lot of pressure on their children, and then you can come back with your 95 out of 100, and then they still won't be happy with you. And from them, it's coming from a loving place because they want you to be the best. For the child, though, it can be detrimental, I think. And I know a lot of people, myself included, that was the reality. And then you grow up now, wanting to be perfect, everything. And it can just really, it can be detrimental and can backfire. But I guess for you, your parents seem to really know how to push you in, that had a good balance between support and also challenging you and pushing you in the right direction. And, well, it paid off for you, I suppose. And
yeah, definitely. I always think I was really lucky in that respect because they weren't easy. It wasn't that you could sort of be doing nothing and not working hard and not focusing. But at the same time, the bar that was set was very much one of, are you doing your best and are you reaching your potential? And I think they thought carefully about it because there were 6 of us, and siblings always compare themselves to each other anyway, and it's something that I think they wanted to manage. It wasn't so much, this one's done this, therefore you must do it. It was more, yes, the other people have done well, or they've achieved certain things, but for you, the thing we want to know is, did you try? Have you done your best? Because in both ways, you can either get obsessed with what someone else has done and be doing a comparison and worrying that you're not living up to them. Or in some contexts, like with my context at school, if I'd set my sights just on what everyone around me was doing, I wouldn't have achieved as much. And so I think for them, it's very much about what can you as an individual do and how can we support you to be thinking about your best and your potential as opposed to this comparison element. And I guess they say comparison is the thief of joy, but I think in some cases it can also be quite limiting. And they were keen that we were just aiming for our potential. And yeah, I think I was really lucky in that respect.
You mentioned that teacher that I've met that brought up to you that maybe you should apply for Oxford and do the PPE. Would you say that was the definitive moment where you thought to yourself, oh, wow, okay, this is something that more than just an option, but it became more a goal for you, like I'm going to go there? Or did you Was it through your sixth form? I think it was sixth form, right?
Yeah.
No, yeah. So was it through sixth form and maybe some other experiences you've gone through where then you came to a stage where you thought, okay, this is now a goal for me and I'm going to work towards trying to get into Oxford?
I think it was probably a combination of things, but I do remember that particular meeting with that teacher. She didn't teach me otherwise, really. She taught a subject that I didn't take, but she was the careers advisor, and you got your half an hour with her. And I can remember it really clearly, which means it must have made a big impact on me. I think it's the first time someone had put those words together. You should consider Oxford, which at the time seemed, I think in my mind, I was like, really? This seems a bit out there. I don't really know anyone from this kind of setting, this kind of school who has gone to do that. And so I remember going home and looking it up and then seeing what the grade requirements were and thinking that doesn't seem outside of my reach, really. And so I guess why shouldn't I? Other than the things that I guess I've been working on over the years to try and deal with, which is that lack of role modeling, the lack of access to information. So I think it did really stick with me. And then when I got to that sixth form, it was a very different school to my original school. So my secondary school was an all-girls school in Croydon, very diverse in terms of sort of ethnicities, diverse in terms of socioeconomic background as well, but a lot of working class people, people from lots of different religions. The school that I went to for sixth form at the time, at least, it was majority white with quite a big Asian population and then a small group of black students within the school. And a lot of the people there were middle class, quite well off. They had cars already that their parents had bought them, for example. The sixth form had people who had been at private schools and then moved in to the grammar school because it was cheaper for good education at sixth form. And so when I got there, I realized, oh, okay, this is a group of people who've been aiming for this sort of thing probably their whole lives, and they've been aware of it probably their whole lives. And I had to have a bit of an adjustment to see if I felt like I could match up to them academically. And after a term or so, I realized, oh, okay, no, I can. I can, even if they've had different experiences to me. And so then I realized, okay, it is realistic for me to be aiming for the same things as them, even if I've got some catching up to do in terms of that wider cultural capital and, the reading and the understanding of that world.
Did that transition from your secondary school into the sixth form and then your subsequent transition from there into Oxford, did that first transition help you? Because Oxford, again, must have been another culture shock.
Yes, it was. Oxford back in 2008 was pretty different to Oxford now. So I think if I hadn't done the sixth form transition, it would have been an even bigger shock. And it did help me, I think. It gave me a bit more of an awareness as to what it was to be in a school where I was definitely within a minority, one of few black students and one of few people who weren't from sort of a very, very comfortable middle class background with like lots of spare cash and, aunties and uncles and law firms and stuff. But it was still a pretty big shock for me when I got to Oxford, because at the time, at least, there were very few black students being accepted each year, and it was pretty heavily private school dominated. And Oxford is split into these colleges, so you have a sort of college system. People kind of compare it to like being in a Harry Potter house, but there are about 30 of them, and you can meet people in different colleges, but you sort of live within your college. You do your initial learning within your college, you eat within your college. And in my year group within that college, I was the only person of black heritage there. So my freshers week was very strange because I wasn't used to that at all. It was very different to, growing up in Croydon where I'd been all my life. Thankfully, there was an ACS and thankfully I found community, but it was a big shock, both culturally in terms of race and class, and also academically. So I'd got the same grades as everybody else, So in one sense, I was as good as anybody else there. But they had such a different educational experience to me, especially the privately educated students. So I came to do philosophy, politics, and economics. I hadn't done much philosophy at all. And I remember being asked in my first week by somebody, what my favorite Plato text was, which I think was like, a ridiculous question. I think they were just trying to show off. I don't really think that's what people tend to go around asking, right? But I remember, and I'd basically figured out who Plato was whilst prepping for these interviews and stuff. I hadn't come across Plato before as a concept, and unless you're studying philosophy, I guess why would you, unless it's something that's in the household. And so again, there was just a bit of that gap to close, which I managed to close. But in that first year, I spent quite a lot of time being worried about my ability. And I now know that I didn't need to worry about that. But I could see the gaps, that they'd been reading these things all their life, and I was catching up, basically.
As you're talking, I feel like there's some parallels between your experience and some of my early university experience. Because when I first went to uni, it was similar in the sense that I think there was one other black person in my year, I think. And other than that, it was a lot of middle class people. And it's totally different to the type of the background I'd come from. Because I come from working class background. The school I went, secondary school I went to was very diverse. I went to sixth form outside of my similar to you actually. I went to sixth form outside of my area in Essex, and it was a lot more white people there. But there was a community of black people there as well. So, but it was a slight difference, and then university was just totally different, totally. And then I struggled at first. I found it so difficult to integrate. I feel like I've got to a stage now where it's got better. I can interact with different people from different backgrounds. But at first, when it was a total shock, the lingo was different. I didn't understand some of the jokes. I would make a joke and nobody will laugh, and then it's just totally different. And it took me at least a term, probably a year even, like to really adjust and to get a bit more comfortable there. And I wondered whether that was, I know you was the only one maybe from your background there, was that similar for you? Like it took you a while to adjust, and what helped you, if that is the case, to adjust?
Yeah, it did. It did. I get the thing about jokes. I mean, I don't think I'm necessarily the funniest person, but with my friends, I can make a joke. People will recognize that I'm making reference to certain, cultural references. And I realized that none of my cultural references landed. Music, TV, film, just the stuff that I was used to, the stuff that I found funny. It just didn't have any currency with the people who were, in my college at the time. And that's why when I got to the ACS and found the ACS, and this is, 2008, there was Facebook, but there wasn't as much connectivity as there was. I remember going to the Freshers' Fair to find the ACS, and I was like, I must find them, otherwise I will suffer for 3 years. And I remember writing my name on the sign-up sheet so perfectly, because I was like, if they lose this sheet or this email, that's it, I'm finished for 3 years. And they emailed me, invited me to the Freshers' drinks. And that community was really important to me. And I've got friends now who are from the ACS, and we're still in contact, and we say we don't think we would have made it through without that community. And I think community has been a really big thing for me, both at university and, I've gone on to set up different groups at different points when I've been in different places, because ACSs or affinity groups, or they have other names and corporates, but groups that allow you to come together with people with a shared experience can be really helpful. And then within my Oxford College, I had a friendship group of people who were quite a few Londoners, quite a few state school educated people. I had a good friend who was an international student from Singapore. So I think I made a community within my college who were people who, I guess, even if they weren't the same as me in some respects, understood a little bit what it was to be slightly out of the norm whilst at Oxford. And so that's how I got by. And then if I'm honest, over time, I actually started to realize, as much as these people were different to me, you can still find connection with people from any background. You just have to work a little bit harder at it, which is a key thing, I think, because, if you're a black person in the UK, you're never going to be in the majority group just by demographics. And learning that you can make a relationship with anybody, it might take a little bit more effort. You might need to work a bit harder to find common ground. But I ended up with some friends from completely different walks of life to me, different part of the country, privately educated, different experiences, but we connected on different things. And that was a good lesson, I think, just to see that you can make human connection even if you've got some differences there.
This concept of community is quite interesting. Because subsequently you've left and you've founded started a few things, that Target Oxbridge, which we'll get into in a bit more detail in quite soon. You've co-founded or founded the Black Alumni Network.
Yes, so I co-founded the Oxford Black Alumni Network. That was sort of 2017. And when I did my stint as a civil servant on the fast stream, I co-founded the BAME fast stream network. That was back in 2012, 13.
So I feel a few things actually, and I'm interested in that concept of community, and also the mindset behind it, because I feel a lot of people, most people, I think maybe I'm naive in thinking this, but I think most are good at heart and would ideally like to do good for humanity and good for people. We don't all get the opportunity to do it. And it can be difficult anyways as well. It's easier to go and just live your life and do your job and think about it. It's way easier to do that than to now say, I'm going to start this and build this for the betterment of other people. But you've done that on a few occasions and then worked at it over a period of time as well, which is difficult. Starting one thing, then being consistent with it again, it's another thing. And you've done that. And I'm wondering about your particular mindset. Like, is there something like within your childhood or bringing or some kind of experience you've gone through, you feel that's given you that kind of a mindset, that is an entrepreneurial mindset or an intrapreneurial mindset, however we want to term it, but that sort of a mindset for you to say, all right, I'm going to start these things for the betterment of other people and then have that kind of tenacity to stick at it over a period of time?
That's a good question. I'm having to think about that. So I think I'm an eldest child, the eldest of six. I think there are certain things that you just end up doing from a young age, just in terms of responsibility, organizing things, being in charge. I think those are probably things that I picked up quite early without really realizing. This just becomes part of who you are, and you don't realize it until you're a bit older and people are like, oh yeah, you're obviously an eldest child, or yeah, we're not surprised when you reveal that you're an eldest child. So I guess there's probably some stuff there. But even when I was in secondary school, I remember setting up a computer clubs for girls thing when I was I think in the year 9 or 10 with one of my friends, because a teacher had said, oh, we can set this up, does anyone want to help? And I volunteered. So maybe it's just something that I've been inclined to. I think when opportunities come up, I've been quite keen to jump on them, even if they're things that I'm nervous about doing. So I remember setting that club up. I was quite nervous about doing it at that age, but I have had a tendency to want to lean into that anyway, because if I can see there's a gap in my skills, or if I'm a bit nervous about it because I'm not confident or I don't know if I can do things, I always think, well, it's better that I learn now than learn later. At some point in life, I'll need to be able to do this. So it's probably best to try it out when the stakes are lower than when they're really high. And then I think when I got to university, the ACS was just so important to me. And I think having a community really transformed my experience and make something possible. When I've moved to other places, I've realized, well, I probably need it myself anyway, but it would be nice to have something here that others can use. So when I got to the civil service on the fast stream and realized that it wasn't very diverse, I had spoken to a few other people who felt similarly. And I just said, well, why don't we start something? There are other networks, but there isn't something for people from ethnic minority groups. And it's not that hard to start something if there's already a structure for it. And so I did that. So I guess I think it's experience in different settings. And then, maybe we can speak about it in a bit more detail, but I'd really benefited from Rare's support as a student and that ethos. Because I'd benefited from it, I actually decided that I want to see if I can apply this in other places too.
Yeah, I think it's a tough question to answer on the spot, and I think it does take a bit of reflection, and it's easier for me to ask because I've done that. I've been asked that myself. I've had to do some reflection, and I feel like with myself, I've come to an understanding as to where that sort of a mindset has come from, in a few places, but from childhood, definitely through childhood, just through people, parents, believing that I could do anything I want to do. So when I spoke at the start about that level of you have that perfectionism that you got to do wherever. At the same time, I've always been pushed, and if I've said I want to do this, is it okay? Then they believe. I could say I want to build a rocket, okay, and then it's like I was never questioned. So I've always had that level of belief. And the second thing I think for me was just reading certain books and reading certain, you read certain books and you just get inspired and you're like, wow, this person is like me and they're so successful, they're doing this, and then it's just so inspiring. I feel for me, that's what I feel has helped me a lot with mindset. But again, like I said, it's easy for me to ask because I've done some reflection. I've been asked that question, I've done some reflection. And it's just interesting to understand where the mindset comes from, because there's so many people in this world, and most people, again, through no fault of their own, it's not an attack on anyone, but most people are not going to be doing these extra things on top of their day-to-day life for the betterment of other people, just because simply we don't necessarily have the opportunity or have the chance to. We've got to worry about living for ourselves and eating and surviving and thriving and becoming successful ourselves. But to have those same worries that we all have, on top of that, say, okay, I'm gonna now work on Target Oxbridge. Okay, I'm gonna go and work on that. I think it takes a certain type of person and mindset. It's always interesting just to try and understand where that comes from. Just now you spoke about, so after the fast stream track, the civil service, you said that you want to start something. Was that Target Oxbridge then?
The history is I started Target Oxbridge whilst working at Rev for a year, and then I went to the civil service, did policy work for about 2.5 years, and then came back. So I sort of jumped around a little bit. But when I was at university, I came across RARE, which is the organisation I work for currently. And RARE helps people from ethnic minority backgrounds and lower income backgrounds into work, mainly law firms and investment banks and consulting companies, with the aim of levelling the playing field. So when I speak to students about it, I say some people grow up with an auntie or uncle in the bank or the law firm, and they can say, this is what the job is, this is when you should apply, I'll give you a mock, go and work with my friend for a week, get some work experience. And some people don't have that. And so it's not that their ability is any different. It's not that they're not able to access these jobs and do well in them. It's just that they don't have the same cultural and social capital. And so RARE is there to level that playing field. And I say to students, it's like you've got an auntie or uncle in the bank now. We're here to help explain to you what your options are and support you through that process. And you'll do the same process as everybody else, but you will have the support that your counterparts are having kind of already inbuilt in their family lives. And I benefited from RARE's help as a student because I got to uni and I genuinely thought a job was going to fall out of the sky. Everyone had said to me, oh my gosh, you've made it. You've made it to Oxford. The recruiters are going to come. They're going to come and get you. And yes, the recruiters do come to the career service, etc. But you still have to navigate this world. And it was the case that nobody in my immediate family had navigated that world before. And so RARE was really important for me in terms of understanding what my options were and how I could go through that, to the point that I thought, I would like to contribute to this. I've seen how my journey has been so luck dependent. I talked about the luck to getting into the right school to get me to the university. I happened to meet RARE that helped me to get some access to career support. If I hadn't happened to have those things, it would have been a very different outcome. And I think that's unfair. And to your earlier question, when I was younger, I used to always talk to my mum about how things were unfair in the world. I'd be worried about lots of things. And she'd say, you can't take on the whole world. You can just do the thing you can do. And that's the best you can do. So just focus on what you're able to do. And I think I realized that I was at least positioned to build on what I'd already learned and seen and make a difference. And that's where the impetus for Target Oxbridge came from. Because when the media storm hit in 2011, saying that there was one black student at Oxford, which was not true. It wasn't true. We would have known. The ACS was already small. If there was one going, we would have all known. But, these things happen, they get into the media, there's a big media storm. But what happened afterwards was nothing. Nothing. Everybody was upset about it, apparently. But then there was no announcement for a structured program to improve it. Anything to actually make the difference. And that had left me really angry because I'd known that if I had been 16 and I had seen that news story, I probably wouldn't have applied because I was this close to not doing it because I was so worried about not having any access to role models, not knowing what I was signing up for. And I was very angry about it. I'd communicated that to the managing director at RARE, who'd also been at Oxford. And he said to me, well, if you design something, we'll fund it pro bono. And I said, oh, wow, okay. I was only 21. And again, to that point I'd made before about often doing the things I'm scared of because the opportunity's there and it's better to try. I was terrified of this idea that I'd get trusted to do this. But I thought, well, I'm actually well positioned for once in my life to do something about this. I'm angry about it and my skills align. I'm in the right place at the right time. And so let me try and make that change. And that's where Target Oxbridge came from. I basically designed the program that I'd wished I'd had when I was a student that would give access to role models, demystify Oxford and Cambridge, help students to understand how to make the right decisions, And if Oxford isn't for them or Cambridge isn't for them, fair enough. But I don't ever want Black students opting out of that simply because they don't have the right information or access to role models.
Interesting. So you were sort of uniquely placed in a way, like your background made you the perfect person to do this actually in a way, which is really, really interesting and really cool. For a bit of context, I know you've just kind of said touched on what Target Oxbridge is, but just for a bit of context, people aren't necessarily aware of what Target Oxbridge is. It'll be good to lay that foundation, like what it is and how it helps the students go about getting places at Oxbridge.
It's a free program that helps students of Black, African, and Caribbean heritage, including mixed race students, apply to Oxford and Cambridge. They sign up to us in year 12 and they get 2 years of support from us to make the right choice in terms of their course. They get to visit Oxford and Cambridge. They get one-on-one support from somebody in the Target Oxbridge team to do that preparation over that 18-month window. And that will be advice on what to read, how to be reading it with a personal statement in mind as the final aim, but also how to ensure that they're picking the right subject. And for the students we work with, a lot of our students come to us saying, I want to do medicine, I want to do law. Some of that is genuine and some of that is parental influence. And we're there to help them make the right choice for them. Because 3 years doing a law degree when you don't care about law is very, very miserable and you will not graduate with a 2-1. So we're trying to make sure that they're making good choices and informed choices. And we say, yeah, you can do that with a history degree. You can do a conversion course. You can still go off and do these things, but let's just get you through the degree in a way that is good for you mentally and emotionally and gets you the best possible outcomes. And then you can pursue these other options. And we also give the students lots of interview prep. They get subject-specific mentors. And the aim is for them to get exposure to Black Oxbridge students throughout the program, which in the early years did mean sort of rounding up the friends that I had through the ACS to come and speak to them because the numbers were really small. But now things have really transformed over the past decade. So when I started Target Oxbridge, Black students made up just under 1% of the intake of undergraduate students to Oxford and Cambridge, and now it's quadrupled to about 4%. And so things are very different. There are lots of Black students at Oxford and Cambridge now who I don't know, which is good. It didn't used to be like that. And we make sure that the students get to see them and have access to these role models, because that's really important to see that people just like you, but also not a certain type of person. The students initially all thought like, oh, they're all just going to be people who only read and do nothing else, and they're not going to be normal like me. And they meet them and they say, really normal? I'm like, yeah, they're not, they like to study, they're bright, but they're normal people. They'll listen to the same music as you, they'll watch TV like you. They're not weird little robots or anything. And I think just demystifying that and helping them to realize that this is something they can do too is the key part of the program.
That role modeling is really key, because if you don't see it, it's hard to really believe you can do it, and literally. So that role modeling is really, really key. And with Target Oxbridge, you touched upon the success that the program has had, and I had to read through the impact report. And so just looking at the impact, if you haven't seen it, look at the impact report, and just seeing the numbers and the visualizations and seeing how successful the program has been is quite phenomenal over the period of time that you was in charge of the program. And what do you feel is there any particular facets, something that was different about it that made the students that have gone through that program so much more successful than the average person that applied?
So the program is really focused, and that was really key. And when we set it up, some of the initial questioning was, why is this so specific? Like, why are you doing this just for Black students? Why are you doing it just on Oxbridge? This is so specific. And the answer was hard problems need specific solutions. And there were lots of access programs generally already out there, which were looking at, maybe ethnic minority students in general, Russell Group universities in general. But sometimes with these general approaches, you're missing particular groups. And so those general programs had lots of ethnic minority students on them, yes. If you disaggregated the numbers, they had very few Black students on them. And yes, those students were getting outcomes within Russell Group universities or top 30 universities, but they weren't necessarily making it to Oxbridge. And so in our minds, we wanted a specific solution for a very specific problem. So that was the first thing. The second thing was we made sure we were being data-driven. And so, yes, we wanted to help as many Black students as possible, but you need to be realistic about what you can do in terms of giving people the right level of support. We actually started really small. I had 6 year 11s and 6 year 12s. And we wanted to make sure that we were recruiting people with the right sorts of grades, given that this was a particular type of competitive process, who were eligible for the subjects they said they wanted to do. I always said, we don't sell dreams. We will help you achieve your dreams, but we're not here to sell you dreams. If the course says AAA and you have ABB, that's not an informed choice if we send you off to do something that, the paper clearly says you're not able to do. And so we made sure that we were looking at selection really closely as well. And then we worked with the students one-on-one. And I think that was the key thing. This wasn't just, these were bright students, but so much of what they needed help with was their confidence when it came to approaching this process and this institution. So much of it was, I don't believe I can do it, which to me was sometimes crazy because I was looking at the grades on my sheet and I was like, no, you can do this. I've seen, what you've managed to achieve, the context you've managed to achieve it in. But they sometimes just didn't have the self-belief, the confidence, because they didn't know anyone like them who'd managed it. And so I was being there with them throughout that process. Sometimes it's for academic support, sometimes it's for pastoral support. I did so many calls in the early days just before people were going for interview, where they're on the phone, they're like, I can't do it. And just being there to talk them through it, say, well, you can, this is everything you've done so far. Yeah, this feels like a big hurdle, but really you've already run most of the race. You've done the hard work. This is just for you to make it over the line. And so when students have reflected afterwards, they'll say, yeah, just having someone believe in me who's got an understanding of what this world involves and can believe in me and tell me that I can do it is really key. So I think those are probably three of the key things. And then the unintended thing was a community that grew up around it. So I knew that they would all get a cohort feel. But you can't control what people do when they meet. And the thing that's been so amazing to me over the years is the students have met and they've just formed these support networks. They've formed these communities. And we can't control for that, but we find out they're setting podcasts up with each other, or they are doing study groups with each other. And for some of the students, they're the only person like them that they know wanting to aim for a particular type of university, studying particular A-levels. They don't have any friends who are also Black, also aiming for those things. Suddenly they've got a network. And we don't even know what they're doing all the time, but we'll find out. They're like, oh yeah, miss, we set this podcast up and interviewed a doctor. Here's the episode. We're like, wow, this is amazing. And so that we can't control for, but by putting them together, we've been able to help them form support networks too.
Towards the start of this conversation, you spoke about with your own experience where your friend handed you the thing and then you 3 days before and etc. And there's been a series of luck points that have led you to be where you are now. And then it's interesting because when you talk about this, like you talk about the specificity, that you do everything with. It's like you take the luck out of the equation now. So we're going to get super specific. Is there, other than the how do I phrase it even? Is there other, like, so you and Rare and you've got your program, you're doing what you're doing to target these Black students and create a bit more of an equitable university experience for them when they do get to Oxbridge. Is there anything you feel that these educational institutions or maybe schooling systems, university, etc., should be doing differently to help these Black students as well, again, to try and take that luck out of the equation?
Oh yes. I mean, things have shifted over time, but when I started Target Oxbridge, not all, there were some teachers who were brilliant and super supportive, but we made sure that the program was one that students could apply to independently. Because at that time, and this is, sort of over a decade ago now, but at that time there were some cases where students were being told Oxbridge isn't for you. And they would say, but I have the grades, but I've been told that I can't join the Oxbridge group because some of the schools had a sense of who was an Oxbridge-worthy candidate and who wasn't. And so I would have students coming to me and saying, I've been told I'm not allowed to apply or I'm not allowed to join the special Oxbridge group. And we were a space that would take those students and make sure that they got that support. I think the narrative has changed quite a bit now about who does and doesn't get to go to Oxbridge, and it's changed. But I think teachers sometimes had their own preconceptions about Oxbridge that they'd carried with them. I think sometimes that racism was present within the school system. And so the low expectations, which, have been evidenced within schools, was playing out. And it plays out in these different ways. And some of that was, don't think you're the right fit for this. Not necessarily with any evidence for that statement, but there's power there and it can be wielded. And in the early days, I saw it being wielded in a way that meant students of Black heritage were being excluded from those opportunities. Things thankfully have shifted, not to say they've shifted everywhere, but I see that less now than I used to, thankfully. It's still present, unfortunately. And so I think there's work for schools to do on tackling racism and bias within schools, and that comes in for predictions. So there's evidence that students from lower income backgrounds and Black students more likely to be from that type of background will be under-predicted if they're sort of a high-performing student, but they might have that lower prediction, which can become a big problem if you're aiming for Russell Group universities. And there's, statistics around exclusion rates and Black Caribbean students, for example, being massively overrepresented within those exclusions. And so I think there's a lot of work there to be done still. I think if you look at the school population, school students is about 36% ethnic minority within schools. But if you look at the teaching population, it's about 85% white. And so we can, of course, be inspired by and be taught by people from all different backgrounds, but having a teaching population that doesn't reflect the population of students, I think there is a bit of a mismatch there sometimes in terms of the role modelling that's happening within the school environment. And so teacher recruitment is a challenge for many reasons at the moment, but I think for the future, that is something that would be helpful in terms of addressing over time.
I read an interesting piece that you wrote about social mobility, talking about the intersection between class and race and how they two interact and work towards limiting social mobility. It'd be interesting if you spoke about your thoughts on that and then just expand upon that here.
Yes, I think I always like to talk about that intersection because sometimes, especially with the work that I do, so I've been doing work on diversity inclusion for over a decade now, with an initial focus on race, but that will always involve class because people from ethnic minority backgrounds are overrepresented within working class backgrounds. But sometimes it's really frustrating when people will say, oh, but it's actually just all about class. It's just all about class. And they will try to suggest that if you dealt with class and that sort of inequality, the race element would fall away and those inequalities would fall away. And what I always try to say is these two things are both very important. They are related, but they are not the same. And so people can be subjected to racism within the education system or employment, regardless of their class status. That is why people can become quite successful, but still experience racism in the workplace. It's why there's evidence that if you have names of particular cultures, you've got to submit more applications to get called for an interview or get a response back than if you have a white sounding name. That's a race and racism issue. That's not just a class issue. There are also some people who conceive of the working class as just being a group of white people. And there's a narrative sometimes that, working class means white working class. And yes, there are lots of white working class people, of course, but also very large proportion of ethnic minority groups are also working class and are also experiencing poverty and experiencing those socioeconomic inequalities. And so I think it's key to remember that because there's an interplay there. But there's research that shows that these things have an effect that are sort of multiplicative, they multiply basically. Yeah. So there's evidence that shows that you've got a pay gap for class, but if you are sort of Black and from a working class background and also female, for example, they add up in a way that's sort of greater than those initial individual things to form a bigger gap. And so it's the interplay there. That's really important. And that's why I try to flag up, because it's not either or. And that's not a simple answer to people. Sometimes they would prefer it if it's a simple answer, but really we have to think about all of these things and how they interact.
Sure. I think often these things are so multifaceted. There's so many different inputs and things that play. rarely ever just as straight as, okay, this is this world is so fluid and there's so much happening, for sure. I agree with that standpoint. With the Target Oxbridge program, I saw that the program, you've had some large law firms that have sponsored the program. What's the response been like from the city? When you're interacting with them, is it a conversation that they're willing to have? Are they happy? Are they like, yes, this is something we need to do? Or is it been a bit of arm pulling for them to realize, okay, this is something we got to do?
So the firms that sponsor Target Oxbridge, they are companies that RARE's worked with for a long time on diversity work. So longer, we've worked with some of those companies for longer than Target Oxbridge has existed. And so those are companies that have been really committed to diversity for a long time, both in terms of working with us to sort of build pipelines of students of Black heritage who we have been working to sort of provide access to the different opportunities, but also to support to develop in terms of sort of interview skills or case study skills, etc. And I think they have understood through working with us the importance of building pipelines for recruitment, which isn't just that you say, oh, we were trying to diversify, but we couldn't find anybody. So, that's it. We're not going to do any more work. They have understood by working with in partnership with us, they can work with us to build pipelines from a younger age. And so, yes, if there is an underrepresentation within, universities or within a certain pool, that's often because there are these inequalities that start earlier. These inequalities start at school, they start within university, they continue. And so they understood that supporting this work we were doing to diversify these institutions will then help build the pipeline that they will want to recruit from. And they're thinking about recruiting, of course, from different universities. But I think they understood that this is about shifting a narrative as well. And so they were very sort of happy and willing supporters because they'd worked with us for a long time. But I think that's one of the key things. So the program is very focused on Oxbridge. And even though we've got a much higher success rate, so about 40% of our students get an offer versus 20% nationally, that's still 60% of our students who don't get an Oxbridge place and don't go off to Oxbridge, and that's fine. The whole aim of the program is just that they aim for this thing. If they decide they want it, and that's why I always say to them, I just want you to set a precedent in your life that if you want something and you're sufficiently qualified, you don't deselect out just because it's hard or you don't know anybody like you who's done it. We're going to make it so you do know people like you who's done it. And yes, it's hard. That doesn't mean you can't do it well. If you decide not to do it because it's genuinely not for you, there's a better course elsewhere, great. Oxbridge isn't the be-all or end-all, but understanding that there's no place that's off limits to you because you are a Black student from a working class background is the aim. And I think all the partners who've partnered with us on that program are sort of supporting that vision, which is hopefully just no barriers.
Do you have an ideal that you're working towards?
Yes, it always makes it sound like a bit of a utopia, right? But I mean, I think that the ideal for me would be, I would love it if in the future, students from all backgrounds could know that there isn't a barrier to them achieving their dreams linked to their race or their class status. Life has barriers, life is hard, and there will always be challenges. But I think, unfortunately, who are worried that the things they want to achieve won't be possible for them simply because of who they are or who their parents are. And that isn't fair. That's the inequality that, we speak of. And I would love a world in which that isn't the case. And, the things that I do are my small contribution towards that. I don't pretend that the things I'm doing are going to solve all of that, but I just hope that if I'm doing my part over here in a way that I'm positioned to do, and others are doing their part elsewhere, we can get to that point where, regardless of background, young people are able to look up and say, I want to do that. And I know that if I work hard and also have support, because I don't buy into this narrative that it's only hard work that gets you somewhere. Most people work very hard, but also get to places because they have support. And that's why community is often at the core of what I do, because for people who are in more privileged positions, they work hard and they've got a community that helps lift them. And I would hope that for young people in the future, and young Black people in particular, given my work's focus, I hope that the combination of their hard work and community will mean that they're able to know they can pursue what they want.
That's amazing. Where do you go to for support? Do you have first of all, how do you support yourself? Do you have some kind of a routine that you follow, and also do you have a support network around you?
Yeah, I've got a great support network. I've got my family. So I'm at my parents' place every Sunday for dinner, and we try and get us all together. With 6 sisters, it can be a bit hard to all be in one place, but we get most of us at most points. So I've got a great family, and I've got some really good friends. The friends that I've had for a long time, whether that's from school or from university, who've known me for a long time and have supported me at different points in my life. So I know I can call on them. And that's always been really key. And then I've also got this broader network now. So because I've worked on Target Oxbridge, done the Oxford Black Alumni Network, done the BAME Fast Stream Network when I was a civil servant, when it comes to needing help work-wise, actually I just happen to have met lots of people, and you never know when your paths might cross again, or when you might need to just say to somebody, oh, I'm trying to do this with work now. Do you happen to know anybody? And I find that people are actually, like you were saying earlier, generally speaking, quite well-intentioned, quite kind if the opportunity comes along. And so I found that wider network I'm able to lean into sometimes. And often it's to get help for somebody else. So this student needs this or this person needs that. But being able to connect in that way has been good. And then the second part of your question was about how I look after myself.
Yeah.
So I try and exercise a lot. I did gymnastics as a kid and I still do it now. Exercising over 30 is, not the same as exercising when you're under 30, but I trampoline, I do gymnastics. It's something that I really enjoy. It's fun, but it's also exercise, and I've got a routine around that. And I try to carve out time to make sure I sleep well. And what I'm trying to do more these days is to listen to my body, because your body will sit you down when it needs to. And I try to prefer to give it rest before it forces me, which I wasn't always so great at when I was younger. So I was doing all of these things, and I did get to a point where I was almost burning out, because it's very easy to, we want to work on this thing and help this person and do this thing, and you don't actually carve out time to just rest, because you're like, oh, I can rest later. But what I've always said to students, and what I realized I wasn't listening to for myself, was it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you want to be here in the next 10 years to still be helping people. And if that means you sometimes have to say no, or you sometimes have to put in some boundaries so that you're resting and you're feeling rejuvenated, that's fine, because that means you'll still be here in 10, 20 years' time to keep doing the work instead of just burning out and not being able to do it. So I try to be mindful of that now as well.
Amazing. Great. And then as we prepare to wrap up, to close things up, have you got if there's anybody that's wanting to drive some change in their lives and their communities and their place of work, what advice would you give to someone like that?
I think it's fine to start small. It's really easy for people to worry that it needs to be big immediately. I mean, Target Oxbridge started with 6 students in each year group. It was really small, and it's grown. And so I think it's fine to start small. It doesn't need to be all singing or dancing. I think if you want to make real change, steadfastness is essential. It was 10 years of work on Target Oxbridge before we're now at a point where we can say things are looking like we want it to. And I think people can get quite easily disheartened, or if I'm honest, sometimes it's not as exciting. Like the hard, steadfast work isn't as exciting. I've checked hundreds of personal statements. That's not, glamorous, but that's the hard, meaningful work. And that's the doing the work. Making change isn't all, singing, dancing, media. Is actually doing, consistent work. And then I think being focused. It's very easy when you're doing something that's specific for people to be like, oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Shouldn't you be helping everybody? And if you've got a particular skill set and you're positioned in a particular way, it makes sense to be focused until you can see the change, and then you can diversify. But trying to be all things to all men tends to not work out as well.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. That's thank you for coming down and making that trek. It was
No,
a
it's fine.
bit of a
It's
journey. The
fine.
weather hasn't been great, but I really appreciate you coming down and sharing everything you've shared. It's been amazing. To close things off, if people want to keep up to date with yourself and things you're working on, how can they best do so?
I'm on Instagram at Naomi Kellman, Twitter or X, formerly known as Twitter, Naomi_Kellman, and soon I'll have my website, which will just be www.naomikellman.com.
That's great. And have you got any final words you want to share before we close off?
I think for any young people out there, I think definitely just take the opportunities as they come and don't be scared about asking for help.
Now add to that, if you're a young person looking to go to Oxbridge, make sure you read Plato.
No, you don't have to have read Plato at all. That's very specific for a specific course. But if you're a black student who wants to go to Oxbridge, targetoxbridge.co.uk. We're open every September for year 12s and we're open every January for year 10s. So we're also on Instagram and on Twitter.
Amazing. Thank you for coming down once again. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. It really, really helps us in getting out these inspirational voices as far and wide as we can. So please do subscribe and share this as far and wide as you can. Share it with your students, friends, nieces, nephews, whoever who might benefit from this information as well. But that's that. Thank you for coming to the podcast once again, Naomi. This is 1000 Voices, and for now, people, we're out.